I'm Mike Sibley, leader of the James Moore manufacturing team. I'm here with Kevin Golden, one of my partners, and also a member of the James Moore manufacturing team. Today, we've got our special guest joining us, Kris Hutchins, who is another member of the James Moore manufacturing team, but also a leader in our our research and development department and research and development tax credit calculations that we do for clients. Talk about research and development, and it's really kind of a common term. It's used in a lot of different industries, but in manufacturing, it's almost synonymous when we start talking about products and process improvements. But what does it really mean? There's a lot of misconceptions about R&D, and of course, it's that time of the year again where we're heading into tax season, and all too often manufacturers don't really understand it. How does it apply? How does it even add value to the company, and where it's looking at in the future, cash flows, things of that nature. So we have Kris joining us today to help walk through as much of this as we can in a short amount of time. There's just so much to it, you can't cover it all. But with that, we are going to welcome Kris to the show to help us understand a little deeper into the R&D credit.
Yeah, no, excited to be here, and thank you so much for having me. It's my favorite time of year is the start of tax season.
I'm sure.
So now I get to help.
Yeah. Well, like Mike said, Kris, we hear the term, especially in manufacturing, research and development. And a lot of people in their minds, when you say that, I'm willing to bet if you ask 5 or 10 different people, you're going to get 5 or 10 different, maybe kind of similar, but different answers, right? So maybe let's start with just a high-level overview of what's the term, what does it really mean, and maybe what's the purpose of the credit, and how, more importantly, how it's applicable and valuable to manufacturers.
Yeah, so I'll kind of start with just a high level on what even is the R&D credit and what was the purpose behind it. It's really the government's way of trying to incentivize U.S. jobs is where this kind of, it's been around for quite a number of years now, and really is trying to foster innovation and create U.S. jobs. So, what you do is you kind of take a look at your activities, determine what is a qualified research activity, and you pull 3 types of costs from each of those activities. And you start with wages. It's typically going to be your biggest, kind of highest volume there. You pull in contract labor and you pull in supplies. And you do some calculations. I say we won't get to the nitty gritty of all of those because that's typically only exciting to some people, but kind of get into that.
All right. Yeah.
And you get to this credit, and what this credit then does is it actually gives you a dollar for dollar offset of your tax liability associated with that business. So it's really a high benefit, way more than deductions are, because you're not having to apply tax rates to them. It's almost acting like additional payments. It's reducing the amount of cash you have to, come out for any of your income relating to that business. So kind of from there, just that high level piece for what's kind of going there. You can apply it to income taxes, and you can apply it to payroll taxes in certain circumstances.
So this is obviously, from a tax perspective, highly beneficial. I don't want to say rewarding, but that's kind of the goal, is right, rewarding companies who are engaged in this R&D process, whether it's improving business or improving products and so on. So that being said, okay, we got a little bit high level. We know it's this tax benefit that's out there, and it's based on these activities. Now let's dig in a little deeper and say, okay, when we're talking about activities, what are we talking about? What qualifies, and maybe give us some examples of, okay, this kind of thing qualifies, but this kind of thing doesn't qualify.
Yeah, sure. So it all boils down to a 4-part test is what the big usage that we have. And it's 4 parts, and you have to meet all 4 parts of this test in order to qualify. So the first part that you look at is identifying the business component and what the permitted purpose is. So this is that you're looking for things where you are creating or improving existing products, processes, software, inventions, techniques, those sorts of things where you're adding function, you are adding quality, you're adding reliability, you're adding performance. So you are adding something onto this product, process, those sorts of things. The second test is that it has to be technical in nature. So you have to be looking at the hard sciences. Now that's more than just biology, which is, I think, the easy one that everybody goes to. But it's beyond that. You're looking at engineering, you're looking at chemistry, physics, mathematics, computer sciences, some of those other pieces on there. Things that wouldn't qualify would be social sciences, art, humanities, looking at market research, some of those sorts of things. Like those aren't going to qualify in the hard science area. But, you could still get a lot from, for manufacturing. Engineering is going to be your really big kind of purpose and key there. Your third part of the test is going to be your elimination of uncertainty. So at the start of this project, there's something that you don't know how to do, and that you were trying to get to that process of getting it there. You're eliminating something that you're unsure of. And you do that through the fourth part of the test, which is the process of experimentation. So there is a series of things that you are doing, testing alternatives, testing hypotheses, doing different methods to figure out how to get to that, permitted purpose and building in that product.
Right. Yeah. And I think one thing you mentioned there, or I know my mind goes to, you think research development is, again, it's got to be revolutionary. It's got to be to me. It's got to use some sort of new technology or whatnot. And I think from what you're saying, it sounds like those activities probably do in some way, shape, or form qualify. But correct me if I'm wrong, Kris, I'd also argue just because you don't have necessarily the brand new, oh my gosh, this is brand new to the industry. Maybe it's just new to me. As long as you have those 4 phases, that it would still potentially qualify. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So it doesn't necessarily have to be brand new to the entire world. It just has to be something to you that's fitting into, you'd had to go through a process of experimentation and that you were uncertain how to do something. Kind of look at it in terms of, you start out a project and you say, I know what I want my end goal to be, but I don't know how to get there. And I'm going to have to try different things to figure out how to get to my end goal. So a bit different than, let's say, if you were to just, pull down some specs on how to build something from another client, the path to get there. And it's going to be things like that don't qualify. But, if you're kind of having to take that process of experimentation, that's one of the big key points here that really can drive home being able to qualify for a lot of these expenses.
And what's interesting here is, I think from a manufacturing standpoint, a lot of manufacturers, depending on their size and sophistication and things, you think new product development, I'm making a new product. And, I think everybody kind of gets that, is comfortable with that, but it's also, can I make an existing product better? Can I figure out a better way to make it? Is there a tweak that it functions better? There's all sorts of nuances, but some of the things we were even talking about earlier today when we were having a different conversation on R&D is, you had brought up safety and compliance. So if there's an unsafe way that you're doing something and you're engineering a new process to make even safety, I was kind of surprised because so there's a broad range of things that can fit into those 4 tests that aren't necessarily, hey, I'm just making a brand new product.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's so many different pieces that you can kind of go down. Are you redesigning your process to eliminate waste? This is a thing that we're really starting to see kind of come into the market, that, sustainability and being better for the environment. So are you changing your packaging and experimenting with different materials and ways that you're building your packaging? Can you even qualify for a lot of these things? Or, to make something more safe on your plant floor, are you spending a lot of time and effort and spending a lot of your company's wages, that you're building to redesign your floors to be more efficient and to build better products? It's a lot more than just, test tubes and beakers and being in a lab coat, that traditional sense that it can happen anywhere. The R&D, can really happen anywhere that you're kind of doing these types of work.
Well, and two, I think of a lot of manufacturing, depending on what sub-segment you may be in, a lot of those are highly regulated, right? So there's a lot of things that you're already, regulations, health concerns, things for the consumer, things like that you are already So I'm willing to bet, continuous evolving of that on how to make something safer for end use, on how to make something okay to use in in transit and last, a shelf life be longer, things like that are always continuously evolving just about in every segment of manufacturing. So, on this show, Kris, a lot of what we talk about is value, right? We've talked about some value. Obviously, there's the tax credit itself and things like that. You mentioned it can be used for income, payroll. Okay, there's some of that. But what if I'm a manufacturer beyond just the credit itself? What are some other maybe value drivers in here that can make this very beneficial to me to say, okay, well, hey, I should be really taking a harder look at this or talk with somebody to know, do I know if all my activities are qualifying or not? Kind of, what are some other value drivers there?
Yeah, so I think you can really kind of start to look through the obvious activities, are the really easy kind of low hanging fruit, but kind of really engaging with a professional and engaging with, a firm that specializes in a lot of this work can help you find those maybe not so obvious activities that qualify and really help you bolster your documentation. So, the real big thing here is, it's a highly beneficial credit. So it brings a little bit more scrutiny from the IRS. So you want to make sure that when you're putting these things on your tax returns, that you have the substantiation and the documentation, and you're working with somebody who knows what is going to be needed in those areas so that you're not surprised when you come down and let's say you did get audited by the IRS and you have to kind of pull all of this back out. So really kind of working through and building in your documentation so that, because, there's a lot that they end up requiring, a lot of the testing logs, a lot of the different, design plans that you have, the different time trackings on there, and kind of finding some of those more nuanced pieces so that you're really maximizing your credit and making it as large as you can get it. Because it really is, putting cash back in your pocket.
I think of this and I take what you just say, and what I'm hearing is you're building a process to support the R&D efforts undertaken by the entity. And a lot of what we talk about on here oftentimes is improving processes and building that, because those processes improve the value of your company. Good processes help improve. So if I'm putting my buyer hat and I'm looking to buy a company and they've got a really good process around documenting, tracking, and showing, their R&D efforts, and I can continue and carry that. And then one, I know I'm as a buyer, I got this R&D credit coming in the future here that I know I can build off of. The other thing I think is it shows the innovation of the company, and so if I'm selling the company or I'm doing due diligence, I'm seeing the innovation that's coming out of this company in their activities to do product development. How successful are they? How unsuccessful are they? What have they done to improve processes, safety, all these different things? So on one hand, when I'm looking at from a value standpoint, I'm thinking, hey, this is a company that's got it together, and they've even got these processes that we can really use to help benefit the company in the future. I think the other thing you said is cash flow. Cash is king, right? We generate more cash flow. The more substantial this credit is, the more tax savings we have, the less cash that has to go out the door. So, I look at what you're saying. You're saying build a process, build a structure, build a way to track and keep this documentation to prove what we've done, what we've been successful, unsuccessful with. And I think that makes the company better.
Yeah, exactly right. Because kind of what Kevin was talking about earlier is it's an annual credit. This isn't like you take the credit one time. There's no limit on how often you can do it. So most manufacturers, you're going to create something from that initial, and then you're going to make improvements as time goes on. So if you have the processes in place to really be tracking that and making that documentation easier to come together and easier to calculate your numbers, you're making kind of everything a little bit easier for all of your stakeholders involved, and really continuing to grow that piece there.
And when we're talking systems, you mentioned it earlier, people, so payroll, suppliers, subcontractors, materials, those kind of things. It's having a payroll system or a system that captures time by these projects. And the more that you can automate those things, but, I assume documentation, like perhaps project charters, and then folders, so to speak, that maintain the documentation supporting what went towards these R&D costs. So that's just kind of a little overview of some things that help make the process documentation, the support stronger to as evidence that you had a R&D project.
Yeah, I mean, because really, I mean, if you think the biggest piece is wages, because again, the point of this credit was really to drive job creation in the U.S. So one of the big caveats on this is like the development has to be in the U.S. to qualify for this credit. Any of the stuff that you're outsourcing will not qualify. So, really trying to take a look at like, are you doing the time tracking to put it to the specific projects? Because that's what they're going to come in and want to see that kind of level of documentation, and then really taking each of those projects and building out your case for how you meet that 4-part test that we talked about. It all centers around that.
Sure. So as we, kind of move forward here, and what are maybe some common misconceptions or some scenarios where R&D, I know we talked about things that don't apply and things, so maybe we dig down just at, so sometimes it may be confusing as to things you think might be, but perhaps are not really R&D.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest misconception is that it needs to be a completely brand new product each and every single year. So really kind of think through are you adding functionality? Are you adding some component that's adding quality to it, that's making it better in some capacity? So really kind of going beyond it's just an initial new product. It's what else are you doing? And then really looking at your whole manufacturing process, and are you making improvements to the way you're manufacturing it? Are you making improvements to the efficiency and the cost that you have to make those products? Like really kind of digging into a lot of those details. I think the other really big misconception I guess there's two I'll kind of touch on is one, I think there's companies that they say, well, I'm not paying tax right now, so I don't need to take a benefit of this credit. And you really are just kind of leaving money on the table. So these credits do carry forward. So if you don't use them in a particular year, you may get the benefit from them in a future year where perhaps you had a sale of the company, you had a really big year, you had some other kind of income event that came in. You can have built up some years of credits that would be able to help offset some of that for you. You don't want to kind of take that just, well, I don't use it, so I don't have any income tax this particular year.
Well, and I guess another one that somewhat sticks out, because I've seen this a few times in the past, and is, those companies that are, paid to do this work, that they're getting paid whether it fails, succeeds, or whatever the case might be. They're still getting paid, and that can be tricky and may not even apply. Correct?
Yeah. So there's some pieces, and we call them around economic risks and substantial rights. So you want to tend to take a look, and even if you are building something to specifications that are coming from a client or a customer, that you're really working to build a very customized piece to them. If you are retaining substantial rights to the technology or what you're developing, that can qualify. And you also have to have what we call the economic risk, meaning that if you are getting paid regardless of whether this product succeeds, it fails, like you're going to take on, the money no matter what, that's not going to qualify on here. But if you're being tasked to develop something and you're only going to get paid if you're successful in doing it, you have that economic risk that has that skin in the game that they're essentially going to reward you for kind of trying to be innovative and trying to do things when you're taking on some risk.
Boom. One of the things, jumping back a little bit, that comes to mind though, in terms of, because one of the things I often see is, we'll talk to prospective clients or new clients and ask them about R&D, and they're like, hey, we don't do any. Yet they have 2 or 3 engineers on hand. And, so one of the first clues is if you have engineers on hand, engineers are sometimes involved directly with day-to-day manufacturing production, but a lot of times they're not. They might be there, here and there supporting, but they're usually working on something. And, that's one of the things I see as a telltale sign that if you have engineers on staff, chances are they're not directly involved. Now, again, that could be those scenarios where they are, but oftentimes they're not involved in day-to-day production. They're doing other stuff. And, again, where payroll is usually a big part of that, engineers are typically on the higher side of things. And so you can add up a lot of dollars really quick if you've got engineer, because you may have others non-engineers working on things as well. But to me, that's just one of those quick telltale signs that, hey, you may have something here that could be applicable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other kind of key piece is they don't necessarily need to be, degree engineers. Like, right. I mean, you can be working on doing a lot of that same type of work. And you might not necessarily have some of that exact title, but that's what we look for when we start getting and doing some prospecting and digging into, do clients' activities. We look at a payroll listing and we look for an engineering title, because that's where you're really kind of looking through some of that. The other kind of piece, I look for developers, kind of what are you, because, we're moving into this world where things are automated. You're using a lot of AI, robotics and things. So do you have developers that are working on that code to really kind of help bring that innovation back to your company?
Well, and I think too, I'm listening to y'all say all this, is unlike a lot of other tax credits and things that exist out there, you've got to do something different, right? So for example, if I want to go get some of these energy efficient credits, I may have to go put, energy efficient equipment in, or solar panels or something like that. With this one, it sounds like most likely if you're doing it, you're not doing it because it's a tax credit. You're doing it because that's your life. That is your business, right? So inherently it's built in there. You're just probably not as aware. Oh my gosh, what I'm already doing qualifies. So that's one thing I like about it is it's not something I got to go out and think of something brand new that I would not have inherently already done in the nature of what I'm trying to manufacture or produce, right? So again, we're not asking you, oh, well, you got to start doing things different. Now it's just put, like you said, process, procedure, become aware, right? And part of that's talking with the right individual, become aware of what these activities are. So then oh yeah, that does qualify. I just need to do a better job maybe tracking that now. So then that way I can substantiate it, you said, and take the credit for that. So again, it's stuff you're already doing, most likely, and people, like you said, Mike, that you already have on board. Any of those hard science, workers, right, or designations, probably a good sign that you've got some level of R&D type activities or qualifying R&D type activities that you just need to dig a little bit deeper and talk with somebody about. So
exactly right. And that's why kind of one of the things that I like to stress is the amending for the R&D credit has become more difficult in the past couple of years. So having these conversations with a professional on the front end, and even if you're not, diving, or having huge spend on it that first year, but that it's coming, have these conversations now, before you're kind of having, filing your returns or not having to do amendments and things like that, and get your processes in place. Because that's just going to make everything smoother down the line.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Kris, are there any, I know we're kind of wrapping up, we're coming out all time, but are there any other, for our viewers, for manufacturers, so forth, any other final thoughts on R&D you think they should know?
Yeah, I just think kind of like what we were talking about is just have your documentation and really just communicate with the professionals around, whether that be your CPA firm, if they're specializing in it, or picking out a firm that does this full time. It's really kind of getting your ducks in a row on it, because it's one of those that if you qualify for it, which I think a lot of companies out there do, and you're just leaving money on the table by not taking advantage of these credits. If you qualify for it, it's worth going down the process of kind of getting your documentation in a row and taking advantage. Because it's cash flow. And like we said, cash is king.
Cash is king. And yeah, absolutely. And I think, Kris, thank you so much for joining us today. I think it's helpful to remind, our viewers, our clients, prospective clients of this issue, because, like I said, every time we talk, we see either they're underutilizing, they're not taking enough advantage of it, or not taking advantage of it at all. So these are great reminders for everybody to be thinking about. So really appreciate your time on here. And, for our viewers, as always, and our listeners, as always, thank you. We appreciate you. And, as you have questions, as you're thinking about these things, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to answer these questions. We love digging in deeper on this. It's an area it's fun to talk about. So, and it's extremely valuable for your company. So again, I hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you all for listening.
To learn more about James Moore and Company's manufacturing services, go to jmco.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our More on Manufacturing series to receive updates when new videos and podcasts are released. If you'd like to be a guest, or if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on a future episode, contact us on our website. You can also follow us on social media for more news as the landscape on manufacturing continues to rapidly evolve.